Hi, this is Gotham Malachi with President number 3, Thomas Jefferson. So, some basic presidential info about him. He wrote the Declaration of Independence to Britain, proclaiming American freedom from tyranny. His administration was from 1801 to 1809, and he was a Democratic Republican. He wrote the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions against the Alien and Sedition Acts under John Adams's administration. He was Adams's vice president, ironically, but in that time period, you didn't run as a ticket, so the second place candidate for president becomes the president's vice president. And after his presidential election, they got rid of it as Aaron Burr became the vice president and tried to overthrow the American government. And he beat Aaron Burr in a closely contested election, 18000. They both ended up with 73 delegates, I believe, and it went to the House of Representatives, who chose Thomas Jefferson because Alexander Hamilton had beef with Aaron Burr, and he convinced the Congress to vote for Thomas Jefferson. And if later in life, Aaron Burr killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. So, domestic affairs about Thomas Jefferson. So there isn't one specific defining political domestic affair that we would like to talk about for Thomas Jefferson, since he wasn't that active on the domestic scale in terms of drama, in terms of sparks. So he was a proclaimed enemy of big government, but he did continue many of Hamilton's policies, like the national bank and the tax system. And as you'll later see, he even uses Hamilton's loose interpretation to buy territory from Napoleon, which isn't specifically in the Constitution. He did try to get rid of the patronage system, the system where the president just surrounds himself with cronies and not elected officials, but people he just supports based on connections, not based on merit. But he didn't call for the complete termination, and that whole patronage system was still in effect until Chester A. Arthur's Pendleton Civil Service Act of 1883. He fought for the repeal of the Judiciary Act of 1801 that took away the power from the Federalist midnight judges. So if you remember, John Adams appointed about 16 judges before he left office in about 19 days, and Thomas Jefferson thought this was unconstitutional, so he repealed the Judiciary Act and the Midnight Judges Act, which gave Adams the power to do that. He also cut down the size of the military and the national debt, but the national debt by $30 million. And the military, he reduced the size of the Navy and the standing army because he thought that the central government, shouldn't be more powerful than it needed to be, especially when it wasn't even in war. So, foreign affairs. So the Louisiana Purchase is the most memorable of Thomas Jefferson's foreign accomplishments. So Napoleon, in this time period, he was eager to get rid of the unnecessary land in America, with the war going on in Europe against Britain, against France, against Prussia, against the Holy Roman Empire, and against Russia as well. And he had all of these enemies in Europe, and he thought that this unnecessary land was eventually going to start bothering him as well. And he didn't want to send troops to help secure the land, so he just sold the land to the United States for about $15 million. And now this doubled the size of the United States, and it was for very, very cheap, as Napoleon just wanted any money at all, as he feared that the Americans would eventually just attack it and take it for free. So the Louisiana Purchase went against Thomas Jefferson's close interpretation of the Constitution to buy land, as it doesn't explicitly say anywhere in the Constitution that the president has the power to do this, but he broke his moral code for what he thought was best for the country, which was to increase the size of America and get the territory. And he also sent Lewis and Clark to explore and map places along the Louisiana Territory to find people, species, and landforms around the territory. So Lewis and Clark, as we probably know who they are, they're very famous, were Thomas Jefferson's messengers who who were the first people to explore the American frontier with its animals, with its indigenous Native American groups, and with its rivers like the Snake and the Columbia River, and it brought the American frontier one step closer to Washington, D.C. The Embargo Act was also one of the most important acts that happened in Thomas Jefferson's presidency, but it was considered a failure. So after the Chesapeake Leopard affair and impressment by both the British and the French, the American attempted to show both countries to respect American trade by making it illegal to export products from the United States. So he thought that by restricting Britain and France economically, he could cut them off, and it would make them come crawling back to the United States to ask them to trade with them again. But he really overestimated the power of American trade, as both British and French, both of the economies of Britain and France functioned pretty normally for about the remaining of the Napoleonic Wars, and it was only the American economy which suffered, as it was considered a failure by many historians, because the American economy underwent a recession in 1808, and it was considered one of the first times America explicitly tried to hurt Europe economically by cutting off trade, but it hurt America even more, and it was repealed when Thomas Jefferson left office. So therefore, it's considered one of Thomas Jefferson's biggest failures, as it hurt America economically, and it showed that at this time period America still wasn't strong enough to compete with the large European powers on an economic scale. But it did show an American fight and an individualism, that they were separate and they thought that they could compete on the international scale with those large and more powerful countries. So overall, Thomas Jefferson is considered one of the greatest presidents of all time, with his continuation of Federalist policies and the purchase of the Louisiana Territory. And I'm really glad you guys learned a lot from this video, and thank you for watching.